are listening to Regeneration Rising, a podcast from Quivira Coalition's new agrarian program that provides information and inspiration to agrarians beginning their journey in regenerative agriculture. Each episode will explore what it means to work in regenerative agriculture, how people come to choose this as their livelihood, and why it's important to them and our future. We hope this podcast provides a foundation of knowledge for future agrarians and land stewards so they can rise up and focus on a regenerative approach to community, relationships, and the land.
Hello and welcome back to the Regeneration Rising podcast. I'm Taylor Muglia, and today my guest is Eva Caison. She is the Education Program Director at Farm Commons, and I chose Eva to be on today's podcast because, well, first of all, we go way back. I met Eva back in college at a random conference, and we crossed paths again through our work with Farm Commons. And I absolutely fell in love with this organization. I have used their resources more times than I can count. As an organization, they provide legal resilience and education to farmers and ranchers. So if you think about things like leases, business agreements, hiring, all these different things that kind of are difficult to navigate if you're getting into this for the first time. I absolutely love the organization and thought we would have Eva on to share not only her story, but a couple of cool projects that they've been working on recently. So before we get into our conversation, I'd just like to share a little bit of information about another podcast we think you'd like. So for the first time in history, our species has the capacity to fundamentally alter the Earth's natural systems. Avoiding this fate requires a radical change in our relationship to nature and how we view it. Nature's Genius is a new podcast series from the Pioneers that explores how the intelligence inherent in nature can help us model human organization on living systems. You'll hear how urban forests can help us address the climate crisis and how forests can teach us about kinship and mutual aid. You can listen to Nature's Genius wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Pioneers and find it online at pioneers.org. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get into the conversation. Eva, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hi, Taylor. It's great to be here with you.
I am genuinely excited for this conversation because we actually go way back. Well, first of all, you're my first podcast guest, I think, with a podcast. So you sound exceptionally buttery, which I really appreciate. But,
thank you, Yeti Mike.
and then also we met, like 10 years ago. Was it 10 years ago? Something like that,
yeah.
Back in DC at this random conference. I was studying ag in college, and I got sent to this conference in DC run by like Monsanto and Syngenta and all these huge corporations. And we formed this like little hippie group of girls that were like, hey, wait, this doesn't feel right.
Just kind of holed up in the corner watching everything go down.
Yeah. And so, why were you at that conference in DC? What brought you there?
Yeah, so the organizers, Planet Forward, I guess they were doing a tour of schools, and they came over to my college, Swanee in Tennessee, and had a table in the cafeteria. And I stopped by and I talked to their people about the importance of growing food to feed the world. And I was just getting into agriculture at the time, and they're like, we have this conference coming up, you really should come. We're targeting college students. It's really important that future generations are a part of this conversation. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. I have family in DC. I'll go.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's so funny. And then, like 10 years go by and I'm working at Quivira and I see your name and I'm like, no way. That is so crazy. And then you sent me a photo and you still had a photo of us, little babies at the conference. Yeah. So, and do you remember, I think Hunter Biden spoke at that conference.
Or my gosh.
A Biden spoke at that conference. And I think back at that and like some really big characters were there. And I think I was too young to really understand like the real
Yeah, Norman Borlaug's
Yes.
granddaughter, I think,
Yes.
was there. I have her added on LinkedIn from that conference, I think. Yeah.
So funny.
So it was really interesting, just the scope of focus on like global development,
Yeah.
huge conventional agriculture, but then this interest in bringing in college students who were more interested in, just community type food systems at
Yeah.
the local level, small scale.
Yeah. So such a small world. So crazy. But I feel like
Yes.
now I'm like, it's just so funny that I love Farm Commons. I have like a crush on Farm Commons. I was at a webinar yesterday. And so, yeah, I end up seeing you all the time now and I love it. And so thanks for coming on the podcast. And
Yeah.
I want to kind of start with your background. So do you want to kind of walk us through how did you make your way into agriculture? Like where are you from? How'd you grow up? And yeah, how'd you get into ag?
Sure, sure. I always have a little bit of a existential crisis with where am I from because my father worked for the US State Department
Oh,
and
wow.
he was a career diplomat. So we moved every 3 to 4 years. So I can tell you that I was born in New Zealand
Wow.
and lived in 7 different countries throughout my lifetime so far.
Oh my gosh. How did I
Yeah.
not know this? That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and that's in part why I had some family in the DC area to stay with while going to that
Yep.
conference.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to the University of the South, which is a small college up in Swanee, Tennessee. And I studied anthropology and did my thesis on basically a Episcopal convent and sustainability in that community. So Episcopal nuns, there's a convent up near the college, and they have an organic prayer garden. And part of their work and life, rule of life that they follow in their worship is work and prayer. It's a Benedictine community, and in their garden, they were installing this huge planting of lavender to be grown for an organization called Thistle Farms, which is a social enterprise that basically uplifts and gives job opportunities to women who have come out of incarceration and sex trafficking. And they take ownership over the production of herbal lotions and chapsticks and candles and
that's so
yeah,
cool.
it's
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
So we were planting this lavender and I was having all these feels, just this very powerful experience of putting this plant into the earth to grow for like such a bigger purpose that I was like, okay, there's something to this. I'm feeling called in this way. And then kind of taking the next step from that experience, I woofed on a permaculture teaching farm up in New Hampshire.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, first taste of communal living. And
yeah, man, you weren't wearing shoes. There was not a shoe to be seen.
There were no shoes. The toilet was compost.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was.
Lots of cardboard and dumpster diving and like sheet mulching and
Heck yeah,
community garden planting. It was awesome.
Cool.
And so just got really immersed in like the community aspect of agriculture. Like there was just this huge, I say, but like it felt huge to me just to have basically this whole little town be organized up in New Hampshire around how they're getting their food, how they're, using your hands to make things and build buildings and barns and supporting local farmers because that's where your food comes from. It's from the farm. And you go to the grocery store to supplement. And so that was really cool to see people trying to make a living in that way. And while I was up there, I learned about Vermont Law School and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't think that there'd be a law school so close to mountains and like you could walk to a farm and there's like a farmer's market right off of the quad. And
oh, come on.
That's cool. Know. Yeah, really cool scene and great energy. And the law school was just doing incredible work. They're the top law school for environmental law, doing a ton of work to protect our clean waters, clean air, support farms. And they had just launched a master's program in food and agriculture law. And so I applied to that program, did it. And my goal was to go into the public sector to work with nonprofits to support community food systems through policies and public programs for farmers markets, farm to school networks, and direct to consumer farm sales, like what I experienced in New Hampshire. But I always had that, going back to the lavender, I just always needed to have my hands in the soil at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. So I worked on a vegetable farm, another New Hampshire farm, where the next door neighbor was this renowned seed saver, Sylvia DeVotts of Solstice Seeds. And so I like apprenticed with her each week and really learned about the ins and outs of growing a plant to get the seed. And then next door, they were using the seed to grow plants, to grow food for a CSA program. So it was kind of like this whole life cycle that I was a part of. And then after I graduated grad school, and I was applying to jobs, I had at that point gone down to Florida, wasn't hearing back. And so I worked on another organic vegetable farm down there for a few months. And I was feeling kind of just a little discouraged by not hearing back from job applications. So I just literally woke up one morning. I was like, I've worked on several farms at this point. I also have a background in supply chain management, and maybe I should just start a farm and just see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have all the pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. And in grad school, I learned about the Farm Bill and administrative law, but also took this great summer class. It was a shorter, 6-week class that they offered in the summer that was literally called Farm Entrepreneurial Lawyering Skills, which is a mouthful.
My gosh. That's hilarious. Entrepreneurial lawyering skills.
That's right.
I feel like rural should be in there somewhere, like rural entrepreneurial lawyering skills.
Exactly. Make it as tongue twistery as possible.
Okay, anyway.
Yeah, so I took that class, and that whole class was basically based on the Farm Commons curriculum. And so we had to sign up for the Farm Commons website to get their newsletter and download their PDFs of how to set up your operating agreement for your farm. Here's a checklist of issues to discuss to set up your farm lease. And throughout this whole class, we were helping a fictional multi-member farm set up their business legally. And so we were using all of the Farm Commons materials to help do that and draft up all these documents for our imaginary client. And I was looking at the Farm Commons website and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to do this kind of work. But it was a one person show. It was just the founder who was running the organization, and there was no, open for hire position. So I was like, oh man, oh well, I'm glad that they're out there doing that. Put that to the side.
Yep.
But I came out of that program ready to start an LLC for my farm. I understood how to negotiate the lease and had a basic understanding of the liability that I would need to manage on top of all of this production experience.
Wow. That's amazing. Tell me about, we'll get to Farm Commons in a second. Tell me about the process of starting a farm. You had kind of all of this runway, essentially through this class that you took. But yeah, tell me about what kind of farm was this? Tell me about where it was, what was the purpose, and then what kind of resources did you use aside from that class to get things started?
After I graduated from college, I worked with North Carolina Cooperative Extension. They offered this position, an apprenticeship during the summer of 2015 that was focused on local food supply chain management. And I worked with they're not a food hub. They're basically a value-added producer called First Hand Foods. And they work with livestock farmers in North Carolina and buy the live weight animal off of them, pay to process it into their specific meat products that then they sell to grocery stores, restaurants, institutions. And I apprenticed with them for the summer. And so, I just made so many connections in North Carolina. So when I was thinking about I really want to start a farm, I was like, well, maybe I'll go back to North Carolina and see what I can make happen. And so literally that, just one morning when I was down in Florida, I knew about North Carolina Farm Link, which is a matching website for farmland seekers and landowners, where you set up your own. The farmland owners put out obviously the terms of what they're looking for in terms of how long the lease is, what infrastructure is available. So you kind of have some terms to work with. But once you make contact, you get to negotiate some of that. So I basically found this property on North Carolina Farm Link that was in Randolph County, North Carolina. I reached out to the landowner, and this property already had a farm business on it that had been established over the past 3 years. And they had grown to the point where they were buying a farm property in another county and were moving off of that lease. And the farm landowner wanted another farmer to step in, ideally a beginning farmer, because they were very drawn to this idea of farm incubation.
Cool.
Yeah. So I drove up, visited that land, met the farmers, and, they had broken ground. Like all their beds were established. They had a footprint for a greenhouse. And so I actually bought a lot of equipment off of them and put my
Amazing.
farm right onto their footprint, basically. And I also did a few work days with them just to like get a sense of the systems. So
Yeah.
that's how I got the land.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. And then, when you were starting up, you used a couple different like capital resources, Kiva being one of them. We
Yeah.
did some research the other day, and apparently they are still a thing. But tell us a little bit about like how you funded this whole startup.
Yeah, so it definitely bootstrapping, kind of pulling on different funding threads. So the one that you're mentioning, Kiva, is like it's a crowdsourced loan. So it's different than GoFundMe or Kickstarter, where I don't know the full backstory of the name, but like Kiva is basically like a shared communal pot.
Okay.
And everyone who is a Kiva backer puts money into a pot, and you can choose which, pot you're putting your money into.
Mm-hmm.
And so businesses for Kiva USA from around the country just make a profile and say, hey, I'm doing this business. I have these needs. Here's my mission and my vision, and would love for you to be a part of this community. And you as a Kiva backer can, contribute, 25, $5, $10, $100 towards whatever the goal is for the business operator. And that money then gets given to the business, but it's a loan. So the business has to pay it back over a schedule, but it's zero interest. So it's favorable to the business owner.
Yeah.
So my Kiva campaign was for $5,000, and that was backed by over 100 backers, including you. Thank you so much.
So funny. I was just like, God, that was like so long ago. I was so excited, and I was like, this is so cool. I just have never seen anything like that before. And I was like, why not? And I think I put in like $15. Like, and that's what I love about that. Cause like you can ask people who have various means to just toss it in. And then tell me about like the paying back process. Cause like if you were to do this manually, paying me back $15 would probably not even be worth your effort in administration. You know what I mean? Like trying to track me down, give me back the $15, like the fee that transfer it. So anyway, tell me about how Kiva like redistributes it.
So Kiva avoids all that.
Okay, great.
Once the funds are dispersed to the business, there's a start date for when the payment schedule goes on. And so my payment schedule was paying back $50 per month. Over however many months. It's been a while, so I don't, have all those numbers top of mind. But I just built that into my business budget. Like I have to pay Kiva back $50 every month, and as those funds get paid back into Kiva, Kiva redistributes them back to the backer.
That's amazing.
So that they can then, you could take your $15 and invest it in another business project.
That's so cool. And I remember getting updates too. Like I would get email updates like, hey, here's what I'm doing on the farm. And I was like, this is so cool. I really like this. I think I don't know. I actually don't really think I've heard of anybody else using that platform, but I think they should. Like, I think listeners should look into it if they're starting a startup food business or like something really mission driven. That's the ultimate way people can feel like they're making a difference, because they're getting like a direct message like pretty periodically too. I remember being like, Eva, go. Like, that felt so good. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you use that platform.
Yeah, me too. That community aspect was key because, when you're starting a business, especially a farm business, and you're like out there in a rural area, if you are in a rural area, like you can feel kind of alone. So it always felt like I was touching base with my crew every time I sent out one of those blasts.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, okay, so you started this farm, you ran it for a couple years. What were the big sort of takeaway lessons that you learned from doing it? From like, you had all the pieces, you put them all together, you try, like, not unlike myself. And so I really, I very much, we bond over this a lot. So tell me about like
former farmer lives.
Yes. Former farmer. We should start a podcast, former farmer podcast. Yes. It's a very emotional experience to close down a farm and like to try something and then go through the process of like closing it all down. But like there's some huge lessons that you got out of it. Tell me what you learned.
Yeah. Learned a lot. So I opened the farm in 2017 and ran it for 3 full seasons, growing vegetables, herbs, flowers, and really selling primarily through community supported agriculture shares, CSA. So, I talk about like the actual food, but there was like a community that was growing around the farm as well. Yeah, I started out with like, I think 4 CSA members my first season, and my third season I closed with 40. So like super rapid growth.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
But because I knew about the liability of having volunteers and interns, and I couldn't yet afford to hire employees. Yeah, it was just me and my partner then at the time. So it was a lot. And there are several contributing factors for closing the business down. But the big one was, in addition to the Kiva loan, part of how the financials worked was that there were me and my romantic partner, and he had an off-farm job.
Mm-hmm.
And that income was how we were able to, basically survive, pay our rent, health insurance.
Super
food.
common. Yeah, that's like what a lot of people do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so farming is totally all encompassing lifestyle. Ranching, and it's stressful. So we did not manage our stress very well. And I think, those pressures just kind of eliminated some cracks that were already there. Then that just broke open, and we ended up breaking up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks. So the big lesson learned was that, when you're going into business with someone else, especially a romantic partner, whether you're married or not, like it's so important to just talk about everything as much as possible. Basically, like anything that comes across your mind, any decision that you're making, any goal that you're kind of charging at, include the other person, talk about it as much as possible, get their take, make those decisions together. Because, kind of forecasting my work with Farm Commons, we talk a lot about, what are each of our roles in the business, and what does each of us contribute in time and money, what's expected, and what's the actual ownership of the business, like legally. And for us, the farm was my thing. And so I set up a limited liability company for the business, but I made us both member owners because he was definitely contributing, time,
Totally.
money, help, moral, emotional support, all of that. And so we owned the business 50-50. But then we broke up, and we had to figure out how to take him out of the business while valuing all of his contributions in a way that would still hopefully enable the business to survive. And honestly, it was a big mess, but we eventually got it figured out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this is not even just for, like you said, like not even just for married couples, but it's almost like harder when you're not married, because you're like, things are way more flowy and like arbitrary, and you haven't, sometimes you don't feel comfortable talking about that stuff quite yet with somebody that you're dating. I know I started a farm with somebody I was dating, and now looking back, I'm like, oh boy, we should have talked about a lot more stuff and really gotten it all out. And so I think that's a fantastic lesson that you learned the really hard way, but I'm sure you pulled a lot out of it that you're helping other people try to approach better to avoid that mess.
Yeah, 100%. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I very much want everyone I work with to avoid that mess.
Yeah, totally. So let's get into Farm Commons. So tell me, what is Farm Commons? And after that, you can maybe go into like, why is it important to you specifically?
Yes. So Farm Commons is a national nonprofit organization that specializes in legal education for farmers and ranchers nationwide. And listeners are probably like, the law is huge. What type of law do you educate on? And we call it farm law, but it's basically small business transactional law within the agricultural context. And so we teach on employment law best practices for farm operators, because there's a lot of exemptions in the law for agriculture. We teach on business structure considerations for operators to decide, like, how do we want to structure our business? Be a sole proprietorship, form an LLC, what are the benefits and downsides of all the different options. But if I had to distill down our work, it's basically we help farmers and ranchers make strategic decisions to manage their legal risks. And our approach is a bit unique in that, we don't want farmers to like drop everything and only focus on the law. We know y'all are busy people, you have a lot going on with your businesses, and the risks that you manage should be your top priorities. Don't manage all of them, unless that's possible. But what are your top concerns? What's likely to happen? based on the activities you're doing, your risk exposure, and what's your budget and time for managing those. So we do a lot of practical prioritization support for addressing legal issues on the farm.
This is such a good idea. Like I mean, Rachel's brilliant. She, the founder. I think the coolest thing was, I think you and I probably both feel this. Farm Commons, when you are starting a business, you are so overwhelmed. I'm like, should I hire a lawyer? Should I pay them a lawyer fee?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I did. I ended up spending a ton of money on a lawyer. But like, I think the coolest thing about Farm Commons is that it's like preventing the lawyer from even needing to get involved. Like, you are doing a lot of education so that people are resilient and understand what they really should be focusing on before there needs to be any legal intervention. And so I really like that. It's like, it's very comforting because
that's good to hear.
Yeah. Because I mean, I don't know, there's just not a lot of like farm focused law stuff that's for us.
Right. Yeah. Like day to day, like, you know, kind of, and I mean this in the best way, like hand holding, like you said, like, it's comforting. Like, there are some steps to take. We'll walk you through each one so you understand what's going on.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, I went to a webinar about accommodations, like disability accommodations on farm. It was like, oh my gosh, man, this is a messy topic. Like, this is going to be crazy. And so I went into it, and then I left being like, okay, I have a very nice grasp of that. That feels, like that feels very not so scary and very like boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. Like I don't have to make this into this big bear, I can follow these kind of steps and keep it simple.
Thank you for
bragging about Farm Commons.
That raving review. So glad you were in that webinar yesterday with my colleagues, Chloe and Benita. That definitely was their goal, to make disability accommodations feel manageable for any scale of farm employer. Not an easy thing to do. Yeah.
Is there anything more that you want to say about Farm Commons? Like, you sort of like scouted this job out and you like found Rachel and you're like, hey, I really want to work for you. And then a job opened though, right? Like their first, okay.
A position opened and I finally got in.
Yes.
And it kind of lined up with when I was closing down the farm. It was like the winter before I closed the farm business.
Pretty perfect.
Yeah. And I like remember it was a very hot day that I was out in the field. I'm making this sound more dramatic than it is.
Painting the picture.
But it was a hot autumn day in North Carolina, and I had just planted 200 feet of cucumbers, and I was strapped with time between market. And so I planted them in the middle of the day.
Oh my gosh.
And they all wilted and died.
I'm sure
the
they
next
did.
day.
Yeah, you're like, I'm done. You put down the hoe.
So I put down the hoe and I opened my phone and looked at my newsletters, and Farm Commons was hiring.
Wow.
That's honestly how it happened.
That's really crazy. And you had been waiting for that. And that was our first opening too. So that's really serendipitous.
So for me, Farm Commons meant like the ability to survive in that moment.
Yeah.
But also now that I've been here it'll be 7 years in October, 6.5-ish years. To me, it really, honestly, like the one word that it means to me is relationships. And what it means to support a relationship in a farmer ranch business between the people who start that business, the customers, the landowners, the community. There's so many points of relationship that make up the constellation of agriculture. And all those relationships are people, and people have feelings and they have needs and they have goals, and taking the time to, parse all that out and address all those aspects is so powerful. And I love doing that work with farmers and ranchers every day.
That's awesome. I feel like the cool thing about your personality and your background is that you do have that. You're not like legal everything, you're not like robo lawyer. When we talk to you, anybody on the team, honestly, everybody's just like doing this because they really care about people.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And then also like some of the legal resilience advice that you guys give is like to be a good person.
Totally.
Sometimes like the accommodations thing yesterday, like obviously there's a line there, but like some of the advice was like really good to hear. It was like, yeah, if somebody has a request, like try your best. Like you should probably be making an inclusive environment for people to work. And, there's a lot of other things like that too. Like when you're negotiating a lease, like build a relationship with your landlord and like communicate with them and show appreciation. And, the lease is there, but really all that really matters, honestly, is at the end of the day is your relationship with the landlord. So
Yeah,
I like that a lot. I
absolutely.
think that's a very special thing about the way you guys approach law. So
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for your appreciation of that approach because, just you bring that to your work with clients through Quivira. So yeah, appreciate you extending that work into your community.
yeah, of course. So let's talk a little bit about this new program that you're piloting right now. We had talked about this the other day, and I really want to share this with listeners. So you're partnering with the Kansas Rural Center, and you're doing like a one-on-one coaching with producers, which I love this idea. So tell me more about it.
Yeah, so the program's called Clear the Way Coaching, and just as you said, it's one-on-one support with producers. Where I'm the only person on staff who's running this program right now, so I get to work with producers to help them basically achieve their action plan. At Farm Commons, we offer a workshop called Discovering Resilience, and through that workshop, participants basically develop an action plan to manage their legal risks across 10 different steps and 5 different areas of the law: business structures, employment law, land access, diversification, and insurance. And there are some people in those workshops who, right away, like as soon as they learn about the value of an LLC for protecting personal assets, like they go and they form one. Like they are charging forward. But the vast majority of people who take the workshop and create an action plan, they're not implementing those steps until months or even years later. Even though they have the written plan, they know what steps to do, but they just need time management support and accountability because like once they close out of the workshop meeting, or if they attend an in-person session and, we're gone after that day, they're left on their own to basically like make the time to take these steps, to call their insurance agent, to schedule a meeting with their landlord, to schedule a business partner meeting, to go over, their governance documents. So there's more work that they have to do, and some people just need the support to get it done. And so that's what this coaching program is. It's meant to help producers clear the way so that they can actually get those action steps done.
That's so cool. And you guys are piloting this year with, I'm guessing, Kansas area producers?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
And the idea is in the future, you guys want to expand this, but I'm sure that depends on funding and this and that. Okay.
We plan to expand. We have a couple of grants out right now that will hopefully expand the program nationally to farmers and ranchers nationwide. So fingers crossed.
That's so cool. Sweet. Yeah, I've noticed that in our manager fellowship, there is, and even, like ranching for profit programs that young farmers go through. I think one of the biggest things they appreciate is the accountability. Like I have a meeting on Thursday or something with my cohort, and I told them I was going to get this done. And if I don't, I have to tell them I didn't get it done. There's this like kind of fire under your butt to get things done because there's like a meeting in the calendar. And the manager fellowship we're running right now, I'm noticing people really they need something because it is so hard to prioritize when you're doing literally 1,000 different things in a day. So
for sure. And unpredictable things inevitably come up. Animals get out, fence lines break.
Yeah.
Things freeze.
Right. You gotta like go do errands in town. Like there's like human things too that just pop up.
Oh yeah. Eating, sleeping.
Eating. Pesky things that we have to do. But yeah, I am really interested in the coaching aspect. Like coaching to me is really a super, I could see you being really, really good at it too. It's such a skill that you have to hold people accountable and encourage people and challenge them while also providing like this really kind and warm place for them. And so it's really hard. I mean, it's really much harder than I originally thought as I was kind of getting into the topic of coaching. But tell me about what you're learning about coaching.
You're hitting the nail on the head. It's a fine line to walk with each individual person. So the process looks different with each person. But what they share in common is that it's an organic process. So unlike our workshops and our webinars that we do at Farm Commons that are like very scaffolded, they're defined by a structured curriculum and there's clear outcomes and, linear steps to follow, and then we're done. Coaching is way more fluid and way more unpredictable. It's directed by what the producer's goals are, but also where they're at in their life in that moment. One client that I have wanted to put together a lease agreement between them as an individual, because they own their land, and their farm LLC to like clearly keep the land as a personal asset. And they were like, oh, we can get this done in the next week. No problem. I'll be able to, share back with you next month that we have it all done. Well, there's a bunch of stuff that came up on their poultry farm that caused some delays and shifted priorities. And they actually had some questions that they wanted to talk through that they only realized once they started to draft up some of that language and have those discussions. So it's like you have this one step you want to take, but then you take it and you're like, oh, wait, I need to talk about these other things before I can take the next step. And that process looks different by each person. And so I'm learning a lot about people throughout the process.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Tell me more about what are you learning about people in general? Because like you said, you have this process where you're like, oh, it's pretty straightforward. Make goals for people and then we follow all of those goals. But yeah, it's so interesting once people get into this stuff. Yeah. What are you learning about people?
When you talk to someone about their dreams, it's like a wave of energy just gets unleashed because they have like this part of them that they're holding for this dream or this goal. And when they actually have the space to talk about it, it's so powerful just here because they've thought about all the details. They like know what they need to do and they just want someone to talk through. And yeah, I'm just in awe every time I talk to a producer about their goals. And I'm also learning that they're so capable and like I said, they've thought through the details. So they actually know what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And it just takes someone to be there to ask them the questions to kind of draw out those intentions and words. And it's accountability to me as their coach. But at the end of the day, they're saying it. And it's really them being accountable to themselves to do the thing that they want to do. But because I'm asking them about it and they're telling me, they have a witness for that process.
Yeah. Totally. Oh, yeah. I love that. And two, I feel like it's, sometimes maybe they feel like they just need to like spitball with somebody or like, or even just like get something out or, just organize something. It's nice to tell somebody else, okay, here's what I'm going to do and here's why I'm going to do it. Even if they have like really no say in it, it's just nice to tell them, It's really nice to get it out there. And sometimes you can try to do that with your partner or with friends who don't farm and they're just like not listening to you or like wouldn't hold you accountable. I don't know. It's really healthy, I think, for a coach to be involved in this way of like, you're a really healthy person for them to just like, toss all this stuff at. You have such an expertise too. So you can be like, okay, let me help you steer you a little bit in this direction too. So yes, I just love that. It's so not like, I just love the idea of a coach. I feel like it takes a lot of that loneliness from the process of starting a business. And I wrote a newsletter about this a while ago, but I tell people at work, like when I was starting our farm, I was looking into a farm stand and I was like 40 pages into like the 150 page health department manual. And I was like, oh my, I'm like supposed to get lockers for my employees. I'm down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was, oh my gosh, but I was so lonely. I was like, am I even in the right document? Should I even be here as a farmer? Does this even apply to me? So anyway, it's just really nice I can imagine to have somebody like you to be like, hey, let's make this simple. Let's break this into pieces and I'm here with you. You're not like going down some weird road, wasting time.
Alone. Lost without a compass.
Yeah.
We try to avoid that.
Yeah. Just me and my health department manual.
That's incredible. I mean, good for you though, for even like knowing to look at what the health code says, because that does impact a lot of food sales.
I'd rather not know.
Okay. I understand that feeling. I do. But I love that word that you said, Taylor, steering, because that's totally what the coaching is. It's like steering a producer into little steps that will eventually lead to them accomplishing their goal.
Oh, I'm so excited about that program. And then you guys have so many other amazing resources. We're going to go into our rapid fire section, but first I wanted you to just tell the audience about like all of the cool stuff. I'm like number one fan, obviously. I'll stop, but tell us about your podcast. Discovering resilience, guiding resilience, webinars,
Oh,
all
yeah.
this. Tell us about it.
I mean, you're a great spokesperson, Taylor. You know what we got to offer. We always keep busy at Farm Commons. We have many webinars on the docket. We are hosting semi-frequent conversation forums for producers who are impacted by the federal funding freezes. We also are running various webinars promoting our new collections of legal guides. So we have a brand new selection of materials on nonprofit and social benefit business structures for farm businesses. So producers who are interested in more mission-oriented production, for education, food access, that kind of thing, and are interested in forming a nonprofit, we have a guide on what those legal considerations are, like tax considerations, how to get your tax exempt status, how to maintain your nonprofit status, and why that entity may not be a good decision for your goals, depending on what your goals are. So we kind of, walk you through some for-profit alternatives like B Corp certification. And we have another set of guides that have just come out that you preface the disability accommodation materials that help producers understand how the Americans with Disabilities Act impacts their employment program and how to manage accommodation requests from employees. And we have so much, a new collection of materials on botanical product regulation. So for all you producers out there making tinctures and herbal blends and soaps, we have material for you on labeling rules and what you can and cannot say about what your product does and how what you do say impacts which entity regulates it, whether that's federal, state, or otherwise.
Wow. You guys really find every little corner to go into, and I love it. And then you have a podcast, right? I mean, you do. You have this lovely mic, so
I have my trusty mic here. And tap into it. I hope that wasn't too loud. Our podcast has been a little sleepy since last year, but we did just publish a new episode on accommodating employee disabilities on the farm. So that's out.
Okay.
Tune into that new episode. Awesome. And we always are running our Discovering Resilience workshop for producers and Guiding Resilience workshop for agriculture service providers each year.
Awesome. Did you mention this yet? You guys used to have like a forum.
The Commons.
Yes,
the Commons
that thing was
community.
So cool. Did you end up closing that down, or do you have another version of that?
We had to close the first version down because we lost access to that software. We got priced out. So we're working on building an alternative that's housed on our website. People wouldn't know this before, but when you went to the Commons in the past, you'd get ported to another website, basically.
Yep.
And so this new version we're trying to build actually on our website. So stay tuned.
Cool. Yeah, because I feel like the benefit of that, like I would jump on there and be like, what if an apprentice breaks their leg? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's like so many things that can happen in employment and leases and this and that. People would just jump on there and ask questions. And then you guys would comment, other people would comment with their experience and stuff. So I'm excited that that's coming back.
Yes, definitely coming back, and appreciate that you were one of our active users.
Oh yeah.
When we had it up.
Girl.
I know.
Okay. Okay, let's jump into our rapid fire section here at the very end. Don't think too much. Don't give me a super long answer. Just whatever comes to your mind. You can finish this sentence. Being a beginning agrarian means
deep respect for where you are and who you're with.
I like that. If you had a private chef to cook you any dish after a long day, what would it be?
A soft-boiled egg.
Soft-boiled egg?
It's such a comfort food. And I want like the most professionally cooked soft-boiled egg. And honestly, in this market, it is a luxury.
That's true. That's very true. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I think that would be my death row food too. I've been thinking about this.
A soft-boiled egg
with toast and beans.
Okay. A little British. A little British.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Most of the countries I grew up in are part of the Commonwealth.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. What's one book on your bookshelf?
Brief Flashings in the Phenomenal World by Katie Arnold. It's about Zen and the art of running.
Ooh, yes. We talked about this last time.
Yeah, trail running.
You're a big runner. Cool. What's one musical artist I should listen to?
I am very into electronic dance music at the moment, EDM, and Fred again is really doing it for me.
Yep. I keep hearing that around town, so I gotta look that up. What's a non-ag related hobby or interest of yours?
I'm a big knitter, but I use only wool yarn, so sheep, still ag related.
Oh, yeah. I know that's honestly how 99% of people answer this. A nugget of advice for other beginning agrarians is?
To write everything down, which should be no surprise, especially your agreements, but also what's important to you, how you're feeling about things with the business from day to day. It can be really insightful to look back on different stages of your career. Like I still have all of my journals from when I was running the farm, and every now and then I'll like be going through my filing cabinet and go through one, and I'll be like, wow, I planted how many trays of larkspur, and how many of them did I actually harvest? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a good idea. Write everything down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You kind of forget, even just like for record keeping, to go back and see that. And then,
for sure.
And then it's very sweet to see your little self trying her best.
Trying so hard. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I am so thankful to you, Eva, for coming on to this podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your story, all of these vulnerable things, and then also just so much of your expertise. I value you as a friend, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, likewise, Taylor. Really grateful for our years of friendship and how we're able to continue our connections throughout our careers, but also in our lives.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to connect to the broader Quivira community of ranchers, farmers, conservation and government agency professionals, educators, nature nerds, curious consumers, and more, we're excited to have you. Our website is quiviracoalition.org, and in the upper right, click on Get E-News to sign up for our newsletter, where we share happenings and events, learning opportunities, job postings, and more. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review and a rating. It really will help other people find us and maybe even find their next step in regenerative agriculture. Thanks so much, and see you next time. This podcast was produced by Quivira Coalition in our quest to support resilience on working lands. Learn more about our work and how you can support regenerative agriculture and solutions to climate change at quiviracoalition.org. This episode was edited and engineered by Caleb Wenzel-Fisher. A Folk Story, our theme music, was made by Alex Cristoforetti, and we're grateful for our guests who take time out of their busy lives to share their experiences with us.